This is Erma Grego from Senior Perspective. We have two special guests with us today. The candidates for the state legislative representatives for the 40th District, which includes Peters Township, Mr. Al Pettit and Mr. Tom Kovach. I want to welcome both of you and thank you for taking the time from your busy schedules to be with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Mr. Pettit, since you are the incumbent for our area, is that correct?
That's right.
Would you mind telling our viewers a little bit about yourself?
I'd love to. Thank you. First, the good stuff.
Okay.
I married my college sweetheart 5 days after we graduated from college. Had 3 children, all married. Now have 10 grandchildren. And I've lived in Upper St. Clair for almost 24 years now. Went to college at Penn State, graduated with a degree in political science, which is study of government. As soon as I got out of the service, got married, moved to Fort Benning, Georgia, the infantry school. From there, went to California, where as a young infantry officer, I taught basic training. And then went to Korea, where I served as an infantry platoon leader, and then executive officer for a heavy weapons company, and then briefly heavy weapons company commander. After Korea, came home, picked up the daughter that was born while I was gone, and my wife, and we moved to Charlottesville, Virginia, where we attended the University of Virginia and graduated from the law school there. Upon graduation, went to work for Westinghouse and had 32, almost 33 wonderful, wonderful years. Great, great experience. Really had 3 simultaneous careers at Westinghouse. The first one was in general management, and that meant that I was involved in developing long-range plans and then critiquing long-range plans, involved in developing and then administering budgets, and then, in addition, working with a vast array of state and local government agencies and state and local government courts. Second part of that career was in what I call the people business. I got involved in all of the aspects of a company working with people, developing and monitoring, administering insurance plans, pension plans, savings plans, workers' compensation, unemployment insurance, management development, training, safety, and so forth. Incidentally, these are all subjects that we deal with on an ongoing basis in Harrisburg, so it's valuable. The third and last was bargaining. I bargained with unions, local unions, national unions, and overseas many foreign unions. During the last 20 years of that experience, I also worked in local government. I worked on the Upper St. Clair Civil Service Commission, and then for an extended period of time was chairman of that commission, and then was elected twice as a township commissioner. In Peters Township, we would call it a councilman for the township of Upper St. Clair. I believe that this unique, unusual collection of experiences has stood me in good stead. Special training in government and college, military leadership experience, all my business experience, 3 different phases of it, 20 years in local government, now 4 years as a representative in Harrisburg, has blessed me with training and experience that is invaluable in serving as a representative in Harrisburg. And I hope that your viewers will agree, and notwithstanding my friend Tom, send me back to Harrisburg for another 2 years. Thank you.
Mr. Kovach, would you please give us the...
Yeah, okay. Well, my family's originally from Monessen, Pennsylvania, which is, you know, a little Rust Belt town down the road from here, down Route 88. Was in the Navy for 6 years as a chief reactor watch on board the USS Nimitz aircraft carrier. In fact, my ship was on station when the TWA plane was hijacked out of Lebanon, and then went back and, or actually was hijacked out of Athens, went back and forth and landed in Lebanon, and we sat on station off the coast of Lebanon for about 100 days in a row out at sea, which is, and unfortunately, it's a positive advantage for the Navy being a nuclear-powered ship, but unfortunately for the personnel, you don't get any liberty when you're in a situation like that. I met my wife while I was in the Navy. We've been married nearly 12 years now. My oldest daughter, Megan, just started kindergarten this past Monday. And my youngest daughter, Patricia, is 18 months old, and she's doing pretty good, I guess.
Getting involved
yeah,
with the 2-year-olds.
Right, yeah, well, she might have leapfrogged into that stage by this point. I have a master's degree from the University of Pittsburgh in Public and International Affairs. Basically, I used the VA benefits I earned while I was in the military to get that master's degree. Right now, I work as a loss control engineer for an insurance company. It's kind of a unique experience, basically. What I end up doing is visiting every type of business you could possibly imagine, from a mom and pop's general store through steel mills and coke plants. So in fact, I was at a coke plant today. And you get a good perspective on what business people are up against, I think. And it's been an overall pretty good experience, pretty good career, you know. And that's about it, I guess.
Okay, I have spoken to a few senior citizens in our area, and there are a few questions I would like both of you to address for our viewers. So, Al, do you mind if I call you Al?
I prefer it, Emma. Erma.
Okay. First of all, what is your opinion of doing away or with lowering the citizens' property tax?
That's a good question, a very timely question. I'm absolutely convinced that the current local property tax is unfair, discriminatory. It's unduly burdensome on people in fixed incomes or low incomes, and it can be fixed. And the way to do that is to reduce the dependence on property tax while correspondingly increasing the income from income taxes. At the same time, you have to be sure that you don't lower the taxes unfairly and unnecessarily on businesses. Their taxes should remain the same. To accomplish that, we've got to amend the Constitution. The uniformity clause of the Constitution says that if we have a property tax, it's got to be uniform for everybody. So we've started that process with Senate Bill 284. We have provided for a lowering of the property tax for individual citizens, leaving alone the higher tax for businesses. That, by Constitution, must be passed in 2 sessions of the legislature, and then after that, passed by a referendum of citizens. So that's on the way. The issue now is to pass legislation which will enact a different tax structure, and Senate Bill 2 does just that. It says that we will have a slightly increased income tax to match a reduced property tax for individual homeowners while leaving unaffected the property tax for businesses. Okay? This is if a community, a school district, votes by referendum to accept this premise. That's the front-end referendum.
And that's the one that guides the way you're going to...
No, it's the back-end referendum that's of concern. The back-end referendum says that if after the school district has opted into this new tax program, if after that the school district wants to raise the property tax again, they have to go back for another referendum. Well, unfortunately, the House of Representatives Finance Committee, which took Senate Bill 2, they eliminated that back-end referendum and added a very complicated formula, which I'm not sure provides similar protection for the taxpayers. My position is, number one, time for change. The system is wrong. Number two, Senate Bill 2 provides a platform. Not totally perfect, but a good start on how to do that. And number three, we've taken the constitutional steps that are necessary. And number four, I support that back-end referendum that was taken out. I could support something else if something else provided the same protection for taxpayers against increased taxes.
Mm-hmm. Tom, would you like to?
Well, basically, I'd like to chime in with a lot of the same ideas. I mean, I think the goal of this state should be towards, if not eliminating, greatly reducing property taxes. Now, the reason it's such an onerous tax, quite simply, is because it's a regressive tax. Which is basically what Al was saying. The less money you make, the more effect it has on your income, because it's not based on income. And of course, that is the direction we need to head. Now, we attempted a larger type fix of this type back I guess in the early 90s, and that failed the state referendum. So in my opinion, simply putting forth a bill and getting it voted on is not so much of an issue. I think most policymakers in the public forum understand the need for a change of this type. I think we need to start publicizing this vote again so it doesn't fail like it did back in the early 90s. And this can only help Pennsylvanians. And again, it can only help seniors and the lower income people, which, you know, there's talk of a problem concerning generational warfare, which I think is kind of overblown. But it's unique that the seniors in this country share the same property tax problem that an initial family, you know, a young family has, because, you know, quite often we're encouraged to maybe buy as much house as we can afford, that type of thing. And usually those taxes are quite burdensome on a young family as they are on an older family with a fixed income. So I think that bill probably is headed in the right direction, but I think that we need to be very aggressive in making sure that we trumpet the merits and getting it out now. If we, you know, this is a referendum item, and all the great work the legislature's done goes for naught if we don't have the political leadership to make sure that it gets carried through.
Well, I know I'm in the fixed income bracket, and I know how it affects me. So, and I can see where, with a growing family too, that it would affect them because they've got to raise all their family and everything. I never thought of it in that way before. I was just thinking of me. The other question I have is on the PACE program. Al, would you like to take that, or Tom, would you want to do that first? The maximum income to qualify for the PACE program has not increased with the cost of living. Therefore, many senior citizens cannot qualify for the program any longer. What can be done about this? Which of you would like to start that?
I'll start this one, I guess.
Okay.
I mean, that really the fix is quite simple on something like that. Now, that's already a program that is wealth tested or means tested, whichever direction you want to work at it from. Quite simply, all you would need to do to make sure that it remained at the same income level is just you tie it to the consumer price index. And by indexing it that way, it would continue to serve the same economic level that it was designed to serve.
Well, my point of view is that you don't get the cost of living goes up, but the pay stays the same.
Right, and yeah, that's what I'm saying. As the cost of living goes up, I mean, the cost of living is determined by the consumer price index.
Yes, but then the ones that they can't apply for it because they're making too much.
What you do is you use the consumer price index as a multiplier against whatever the wage, you know, whatever the maximum income is for PACE. So in other words, if the maximum income for PACE right now would be $10,000, it's just hypothetical, and the consumer price index went up 3%. Well, 3% of $10,000, $300, right? So what you would do is then the income level all of a sudden would be stepped up to that new level. And so every year that the consumer price index goes up, the PACE maximum level,
it doesn't go up.
well, that's what should happen, and that's the type of legislation that would need to be enacted to correct that problem.
That was my question.
Yeah.
PACE program's a good program. Conceptually, it's a good program. Problem with it is that the ceilings have remained fixed for too long. The result of this has been
the word I was trying to think of, was the ceilings.
In 1968, there were 450,000 Pennsylvanians covered with the program. You would think there'd be more every year. As a matter of fact, that's not the case. We lose 12,000 people who are eligible this year will not be eligible next year. As a matter of fact, in 1995, there were only 250,000 people eligible. Barely half of what it was in 1968. The increase in the ceiling hasn't been increased for 5 years. It's now 13,000. That's the max you can earn if you're single. 16,002 if you're married. A bill was passed, Bill 1526 in the House of Representatives, which indexed that ceiling to cost of living adjustments, which would mean that every time the Social Security went up, that the ceiling on PACE would go up as well. Most people on PACE have their primary source of income as Social Security anyhow, and it would prevent them from losing ground. That passed almost unanimously, I think unanimously, in the House of Representatives. and it went to the Aging and Youth Committee in the Senate in June of 1995, unfortunately. It's still there. The other programs that are in place right now, the bills that are being proposed, one was the governor's in his budget, all of them, I think, are Band-Aids. They propose a short-term cure. For example, the budget program announced by the governor would add $1,000 for the single person, and the married person would pay for it by reducing the reimbursement to pharmacies and increasing the deductibles. The problem is that that's a Band-Aid, fixes it temporarily. There's another bill by a member of the House to raise it $2,000, the ceiling on both. And there's still another bill in the Senate Aging and Youth Committee which would add a second tier on top of it. And I won't bore you with the details because it does essentially the same thing. My position is that the way to fix it is not to apply Band-Aids, which means we have to come back next year and the year after and the year after to correct the problem, to continue to correct the same problem. We ought to try and correct it by indexing it. The difficulty is, and I think as a fiscal conservative, I have to point out that that is terribly, terribly expensive. And if we undertake that kind of expense, indexing it, which is the answer, then we've got to, at the same time, find a way to pay for this very significant cost. It's the way of the future. It's the way we ought to go. It'll fix the problem, but it's very, very costly.
Mm-hmm. You feel the same way then, Tom?
Yeah, well, essentially we were
Okay,
talking, the same
thing.
language, actually. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in fact, well, I would like to say very quickly here that this is an excellent example of what, it's not political doublespeak. And what Al's saying is absolutely 100% on the money. But there are some in the federal Congress, for example, that say, well, we haven't changed the funding. You know, the funding's been the same all these years. We haven't cut that benefit. Well, of course it's been a benefit that's been cut, even though the funding's may have stayed the same for a long time. We just talked about it. We went from $450,000 to $250,000. Well, there's an example of where funding stays the same and the benefit gets cut. And Al's right. If we're going to be indexing it, taking that step, then obviously we need to find out how we're going to pay for it.
Yeah, well, most of the PACE program is taken care of by the lottery, though, isn't it? Or,
But we're talking about a tremendous expansion in the cost. And we're working hard to make the lottery more and more effective, draw in more and more money. But we're reaching a limit. And clearly, indexing will exceed the limit of the resources available for the program from the lottery.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, my last question now is, this is sort of a personal one that I've been rattling around here for a while. The senior citizen in Peters Township would like to have a senior citizen center. What as a group can we do to obtain a center in our area? Tom, can you say a little something about that?
You want to start
Or
first?
you wanna
this
start?
time,
Yeah,
Al?
go ahead.
I'd be happy to, Tom. Thank you. I've learned a lot about senior centers in the last day and a half.
Oh, day and a half.
Senior centers started in the early 1970s with the Federal American Aging Act. So that today in Pennsylvania there are 577 senior centers. In addition, there are 152 satellite centers, which is really what you have now, right? These centers are supported by the State Association of Area Agencies on Aging, $4 million. And that $4 million, frankly, isn't going to do what you want. It's for programs and to do fine touching up of the existing facilities.
Buying the hot dogs and the buns.
It's tough. It's tough. Where we are now in Peters is that we have the satellite center status, and we're being supported by Joanne Nelson, the director in Peters of Parks and Recreation and Aging, by Marianne Bonetti, the new recently appointed coordinator for senior citizens, and by Debbie, and I have
Paul?
Del
Paul?
Stefano.
Oh, Stefano.
Yes, who is the Washington County person in the association who should be very helpful. The history in Peters Township, very briefly, is that a couple years ago, Bernie Singer, when he was, I believe, president of the local HARP group, appeared before council and discussed the issue. I can find no evidence of anything happening after that. And talking to Mike Silvestri, the township manager, there's been no formal approach to him on this subject. Recently, the council chartered a group to study the recently abandoned school in Venetia to determine whether it could be refurbished to be a suitable multi-purpose community center. And for a variety of reasons, they
Well, even
reported
something like
back.
that would be of benefit to the community.
Yes. Unfortunately, it's my understanding they reported that the building was not suitable, renovation costs, other problems, and so we're still up in the air. Your question, where do we go from here? I think the answer is very clear. The way these things start and the way they get most of their support is through the township where you reside. So the next step clearly is to schedule a meeting with Mike Silvestri on behalf of the administration of Peters Township and bring along the 3 people I talked about who are involved. And I think you're involved with Cannonsburg as the parent senior center.
I don't know.
If somebody sponsors your satellite center, whoever that organization is, they should also participate.
Angie comes down a lot, so Angie Lampy.
Mm-hmm.
So she's from up in Washington, I believe.
Well, then her organization could support you
With the
also.
area of the
But
aging.
the start is with the administration of the township, and that's your next step. And in the interest of time, I won't go through the financing parts of it, which you may know, but in any event, I'd be happy to discuss that with you later.
Well,
but that's the start.
whenever they bought that property, the Miller property down here, well, they bought it as part of the park, and rumors were going around that we were getting a senior center in there. And that, but it just turned out to be a rumor.
Well, the real problem is, before you go to the township, you have a necessary step, and that is to sit down and determine what your objectives are and what your wishes or interests are, because that, in turn, will help you determine what your needs are. What kind of building do you need? Big building, little building? Do you need it 1 day a week, 1 day a month? Do you need a big kitchen, small kitchen? What kind of facility do you need? And you can't answer that until you know what your objectives are and what your interests are. So when you do that and establish in turn what your needs are, then you're prepared to go to the township, meet with the township, and that's where the process will get its meaningful
Well,
start.
I like your suggestion about the community building. I mean, one that would be used for...
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Well, in fact,
And that,
that's what's going on in Bethel Park right now. I know that there's going to be a voters referendum actually on the funding for community center, which would encompass also a seniors meeting place. And basically what I was talking about is a grassroots movement from the bottom up. I mean, you need to organize the seniors that are interested and petition the township management, let them know what your interests are, what your needs are, and that's the way to go. There's got to be some resolve on the part of the citizens of Peters Township to recognize that need, and that's probably where your group of interested seniors ought to go. And you piggyback along with concurrent issues like the need for a good community center at the same time, which is something, like I said, that Bethel Park is looking into now. And I think it's a great idea. I mean, the communities today, we have a lot of 2-income earners, man and wife, spouses working, and the old front porch community isn't the same. People are busy,
Definitely
they're running
not.
out, right? And we need, I think, a lot of these communities, especially in the South Hills, we need a place to go where we can, be with our neighbors and recreate them and let our children run around in safety. And it's got to be a grassroots movement, I think, more than anything else. And then later on, you look into the funding mechanisms. I mean, there's the property tax, which we discussed was, kind of the more burdensome of all taxes. So maybe you could work in some way of using the income tax to finance it, and also, of course, the state might have a role to play in something like that too. So.
So, well, there's a lot of good suggestions. Now I got to get it thinking through my head here to see what to ask for. So, well, thank you, gentlemen, very much for all your answers. And in this part of the program, I would like each of you to sum up your thoughts. And that, do you want to go first, Danielle?
Fine. In the few minutes that are left, I'd like to cover just 3 things, and I'll attempt to be brief. First is why am I running? A question I'm asked with regularity. And my answer has been and remains the same, basically for three reasons. Number one, I feel strongly that we have to send to Harrisburg people who understand our economy and the factors that affect it and make it move. Number two, we have to have people who understand jobs, how they're created and by whom, and how they're lost. And number three, we have to send people who understand government, why and how it works and why and how far too often it doesn't work. The second reason is I think we need to send people to Harrisburg who understand business, who have some experience in business, who are used to being judged by what they do and not what they say, and who can take to Harrisburg the lessons and experiences and skills and expertise and discipline that was a part of their everyday life in the business world. And a third reason that I'm running is that all of us, in our own way and our own time, we've come to the conclusion that we have to give back. And my way of giving back for a quarter century now has been through public service. And this gives me an opportunity to apply my personal values, frankly, to my work in Harrisburg. Strong, traditional family values. That's why I ran. Second thing I want to touch upon very briefly is some things I'm proud of. And obviously, the first thing, I am very, very proud to have had the opportunity to represent the 40th Legislative District for the past 4 years. I'm also proud of the fact that during that same 4-year period, I have not missed a single day of session. And I am hopeful and expect that 2 years from today in a similar meeting, I'll be talking about not having missed a single day in 6 years of session. I'm also proud of the kind of service that our district office and my 4 associates there, that we've provided to the district. And I won't go into a whole lot of examples. I run into people every place I go who comment on the quality and effectiveness of the service they get. And the last, and one that I'm particularly proud of, this unique array of experiences that I've grown up with has provided me with perspectives, insights into the business world and the impact of what we do in Harrisburg on that world that's enabled me to bring something special to Harrisburg, something special that I share in caucus, on the floor, in committee meetings. The best example I can think of is the recent discussion of a bill to eliminate teachers' right to strike and replace it with binding mandatory arbitration. Because of my background, I knew more about mandatory binding arbitration, how it works, and its faults, than literally anybody else in the House. And so in the Labor Relations Committee, where that issue came up, and which I'm a member, I spoke at length on that issue. I did the same thing with the 102 members of the Republicans in our Republican caucus, and in turn spoke at great length on the floor on that subject. And my comments gave a going over, if you will, of all the background on teacher strikes, on arbitration in general, and mandatory binding arbitration in particular, that I got a series of requests for copies of that. So many requests that I finally had it printed, and I have provided, upon request now, more than 200 copies of that speech I gave in the floor. And as a matter of fact, because of so much local interest, I reprinted that speech and included it late last winter, early this year, in one of my district newsletters on that subject. Those are some of the things I'm proud of. I'm not going to bother to go into any detail on the third item, which is my platform, if you will. A platform for an incumbent is regularly changing. My platform included welfare reform. It included workers' compensation reform. It included strong measures to deal with crime and violent criminals. Well, we've taken care of all those. The things that are left on my agenda are education. In education, we've got to stop teacher strikes, and we've got to start choice. We've got to stop OBE, and we've got to start re-empowering our local school boards. And we've got to solve the financing problem. Second is local tax reform. We've already talked about that. The third is our roads. We've got to do more for our roads. Right now, by the way, our roads are very difficult to get around because we're doing so much construction. That's a mixed blessing. On the one hand, it's a nuisance, but as the signs say, short-term inconvenience, long-term improvement. We're finally getting done so many of the projects that are long overdue in our district. My concerns are they getting done as fast as they should get done and as they could get done? And second, are they being as well handled, as effectively accomplished as they ought to be? We got to stop paving over deer carcasses that are lying in a road. We got to stop shuffling bids to favor a single contractor. We got to stop hiring the friends, neighbors, and relatives of our bureaucrats. And we've got to get PennDOT and the Turnpike Commission to start operating efficiently like any other business, since that's what they are. And until we do that, I don't think anybody's going to be very sympathetic to providing either more gas tax or increased registration fees.
Mm-hmm.
The remaining two items are very quickly. One is the improvement in our economic development. We've made tremendous progress in that area, probably more progress in that single area than in any other area I can think of. We've made great progress. We reduced, for example, the income tax dramatically. But even with that dramatic reduction, there's still so much more to do, because our state corporate net income tax today, with that reduction, still fourth highest in the nation. And last item, I want to see us do something similar for white-collar workers that we presently do for blue-collar workers who are displaced. We have lots of programs for blue-collar workers. We have no programs for displaced white-collar workers, other than that which David Bates, a retired USX manager, what he does on his own through the Interfaith Reemployment Group with virtually no funds and very effectively. With that, I'll stop talking so Tom will have a little bit of time left. And thank you very much for the opportunity. I've enjoyed it immensely.
Okay. Well, in some, let me just touch on why I want to run for state representative. And I heard it best explained to somebody talking about running for politics. It's almost like a calling that you have. I mean, it's hard to really put your hand on why, you know, you'd be interested in going through the tremendous amount of work that it takes to run for public office of any type. But it's something that I've been interested in basically ever since I was in high school. But I want to talk about just real quickly leadership and the need for political leadership in the Pittsburgh area. You know, the Pittsburgh area, to me, is fractured a community as probably exists anywhere in the United States. What I mean by that is we have a habit of thinking only about our local communities. We need to realize here in the suburbs that if the economic hub of this region, which is Pittsburgh, doesn't survive, we're all going to be in trouble. We have a port authority that pretty much only thinks about Allegheny County. We have a mass transit system that I think can be best described as a shell of the system we actually need. We undergo the expense and investment of a light rail transit system. It only runs for 10 miles. It doesn't service the area assets that we have, excuse me, very well. You know, case in point would be something like the Meadows, which is only 15 minutes from here. I mean, running that line, that's an area asset that's not serviced by public transportation. A brand new airport that we undertook the cost to construct, not really serviced efficiently by public transportation. So in the Pittsburgh area, beyond that, there are also the issue of roads, which Al touched on. And you know, I think that PennDOT, ready, fire, aim is the best way to describe their strategy. Now, I have to drive to Peters Township from Bethel Park every day, twice a day. And let me tell you something, it's quite a nightmare right now. They're undertaking too many projects on one roadway at one time, let alone the fact trying to get to I-79 from here, basically there's only one clear-cut avenue for that. So that is upsetting to me. But even under the best of conditions, those improvements are really a Band-Aid. You know, Pittsburgh is not serviced by a beltway and not serviced by the Monfayette Expressway, or those ideas have been proffered. And in fact, there's a key vote coming up on that in a few days. But my point is that you know, Abraham Lincoln in 1830, the very first political speech he ever made was, when he was 21 years old, was improving the Sangamon River for commerce. Of course, rivers in those
It
days,
was
the primary method of
Mm-hmm.
economic transit, moving goods back and forth. Well, unfortunately, Pittsburgh in this southwestern Pennsylvania hasn't learned that lesson that Illinois learned in 1830. And it's costing us. It's costing us in economics. It's costing us, a local business leader told me that if the corporate net income tax rate in this state was 0, they would have trouble getting businesses into the Pittsburgh area because it's too difficult to get around. You can't get your workers to and from the city of Pittsburgh efficiently. And not only is it costing us economically, it's costing us in quality of life. Now, my wife drives to the city every day, and it takes her an hour to travel 10 miles, and that's just not right. I mean, we have essentially the same method of commuting to the city from the South Hills that we had 40 years ago. And to me, I mean, that belies the idea of economic growth. And we're not going to have it unless we take the steps necessary to improve our area, commuting infrastructure, and just public investment in general that Pittsburgh is woefully lacking behind in many areas of the country. So, my goal of Tom Kovach as state representative for the 40th district would be to get these areas to start thinking, hey, we're all in this together in the Pittsburgh community. And I don't really think that's happening right now. So.
That's a big problem to face right now. Well, anytime, I would imagine. Well, I'd like to again thank you, both Al Pettit and Tom Kovach, for joining us today, and thank you very much for your time and cooperation. I would also like to remind you, everyone, to vote this November 5th. There are lots of issues that will concern people of all ages. Please vote. This is Erma Grego from Senior Perspective. See you again soon.